Next up, we have Mehul Revankar, Vice President, Product Management and Engineering for VMDR, teaming up with Raphael Ferreira, Corporate Security Governance with Banco PAN. They will be sharing their insights on a risk-based defense of the threat landscape with Qualys VMDR.
Awesome. Cool. So excited to be here. So today, Sumit talked about the new vision for Qualys platform, which is now the enterprise TruRisk platform designed to measure, communicate, and eliminate risk. Now, the questions that you might have is, what does that mean for the products on the platform? What does that mean for VMDR, cybersecurity asset management, patch management, and so on? So I'm going to spend some time talking about how this maps to VMDR and the products on the platform. There is a famous quote from Peter Drucker. He says, "You cannot manage what you cannot measure. And more importantly, you cannot improve something that you cannot measure." So if that's the case, how do we go with measuring risk with VMDR? We were lucky to announce a new product last year, cybersecurity asset management, and we had some really good insights from the launch of that product. What we realized was the attack surface is expanding and unknown. So let me expand on that. What we found out was 37% of the assets were not known to organizations. More importantly, in our research, what we also found out was 69% of the organizations are getting breached from unknown assets. Now, the attack surface is not just your assets. It is also the risk from your software inventory, which is something we saw with Log4j. Organizations were scrambling to find out instances of Log4j. And when we looked at, our research team looked at the data, what we found out was every asset has at least 50+ open source packages on the system with exploitable vulnerabilities on them. So if the attack surface is expanding, how do you measure the unknown? We looked at the data from NVD, almost hundreds of thousands of vulnerability. And when we looked at the data, what we found out was every other vulnerability was ranked as critical or high by CVSS. If every other vulnerability coming your way is high, how do you communicate what is high risk? And we get to monitor vulnerabilities every day. The universe of vulnerabilities is large, almost 200,000 vulnerabilities, but not all vulnerabilities are equal. There are some vulnerabilities that get exploited more often than not. There are some vulnerabilities that might get exploited in the next 30 days, according to EPSS. There are some vulnerabilities that have weaponized exploit code available. There are some vulnerabilities that have just exploit code available. So when you think about eliminating the risk, which risks should you eliminate? Earlier this year, we launched our TruRisk report. We analyzed billions of data points. And what we found out was the time to eliminate risk is slower than the way it is getting weaponized. So attackers have an 11-day advantage over you. So when you have all these challenges, what is the result of this? The result is you have a cycle of failed results and undesired outcomes. You have an inaccurate asset inventory, a stale CMDB leading to a breach. You have your security teams focusing on vulnerabilities that don't actually help you reduce risk. You have your IT teams miss SLAs for high-risk vulnerabilities. And you have your IT and security teams manually wasting hours, manually communicating risk with manual processes, spreadsheets, and so on. And all of this exposes the organization to unnecessary risks. So what's the solution for this? So we think the solution is three-part. One is you should be able to measure both your known and your unknown risks. This is where all the products within the Qualys platform come into play, starting with cybersecurity asset management and external attack surface management. You get to discover all your assets, both internal and those are exposed to the internet that are not known to you, but known to the attackers. So that is step one. Step two, it's not good enough to just have a good, accurate inventory. You also need context for those assets. Which ones are your crown jewels? Who is the owner of this asset? What's the business value of this asset? Which applications are running on these assets? So having rich context is equally important. And the third aspect is identifying gaps on those, security gaps on those assets. Now, security gaps are not necessarily vulnerability related. Those could be related to end-of-life software. Those could be related to missing business-critical applications, like your EDR solution. These could be related to running unauthorized applications on those assets. So being able to identify all the assets and then the gaps that are installed, or gaps on those assets as well. The second part is measuring the risk of your known assets with VMDR and TrueRisk. We launched our TrueRisk capability that we have talked about, and we'll keep talking about today and tomorrow. Measuring the risk across vulnerabilities, assets, groups of assets, your business units, geographical locations, applications, being able to quantify the risk across the organization. Now, the risk needs to be quantified based on the risk of exploitation, the risk of likelihood of exploitation, the risk of evidence of exploitation. So this is where VMDR with TrueRisk really shines. Let me give you an example. So here's a vulnerability that TrueRisk has ranked as 95 on a scale of 1 to 100. If you look at the details, according to CVSS, this is a 3.9, maybe a low or a medium severity vulnerability. And it's easy to miss out on this vulnerability. Right? But if you look at the details about this vulnerability, it is getting exploited in the wild, according to CISA KEV. It has a weaponized proof of concept available so that it's easily exploitable. And we also have evidence from dark web that is getting exploited right now. So given a choice, would you fix this or something else? Right? And Sumit talked about this in his keynote session. 87 million is the number of vulnerabilities. Across the Qualys platform, we analyze the data. 87 million are the number of vulnerabilities that were missed by CVSS, by incorrect prioritization. Now let's take a flip side of this example. So this is a vulnerability that is a 10.0. There is no exploit available. No one is exploited. There is no evidence of exploitation. Would you prioritize this over something else? So if you used the standard prioritization techniques, for example, CVSS, you would have wasted your time fixing these issues. When we analyze the data in our platform, there are almost 700 million vulnerabilities, detections, were prioritized, which shouldn't have been prioritized in the first case. So TrueRisk gives us the advantage of never missing high or critical vulnerabilities. I talked about which risks do you eliminate. The ones in the red box is what you need to eliminate. And this is where TrueRisk prioritizes all the critical vulnerabilities in your organization. And we have evidence to prove for this. So if you look at all the vulnerabilities that are out there, 52% are marked as higher critical by CVSS. There is a new prioritization capability, EPSS, which organizations are taking heart to. Even that prioritizes about 30 to 35% vulnerabilities. But TrueRisk is able to only prioritize 7 to 10% vulnerabilities, which are the highest risk, will reduce the most amount of risk with the least amount of effort in your organization. And it will also find out things that you would have not prioritized before, the CVSS lows and the medium. Now, this is not possible unless we have really good threat intelligence in the platform and a kick-ass, no, not a kick-ass, really good research team that is out there. We have a massive research team that is looking at vulnerability data every day, more than 120 research engineers working through this data. And it's an award-winning research team. In the field of vulnerability research, we probably have the highest number of Pony Awards, which is a kind of our Grammy Awards in terms of vulnerability research and nominations. And it is backed by threat intelligence from over 25 sources. Now, we see our customers buying these feeds, managing these feeds, stitching all the data behind the scenes, and so on and so forth. You don't have to do that anymore. because TrueRisk already takes care of all these sources as part of risk prioritization. You'll never miss any critical vulnerability with TrueRisk. From reversing labs to GitHub, all those key forces are taken into account. Now, what's the outcome of this? So this leads to desired outcome. One of the case studies that we're super proud of. So Cintas used VMDR and patch management for their vulnerability management needs. With our solution stack, they were able to get 98% accuracy with their CMDB. Kind of unheard of with our solution. When it comes to measuring risk, they were able to reduce the risk by 55%. When they started their vulnerability management program, they were at around 600 risk score. Within days or months, they were able to reduce it to 267. Almost 55% reduction. And this is not across like 1,000 assets, like almost 40,000 assets. They're able to, with patch management integration, they're able to reduce their mean time to remediate significantly by 92%. That's a big deal. Just 7 days. I talked about 11 days is the advantage the attackers have. So we are able to shorten that gap to breach your organization. And more importantly, because they were able to measure their risk accurately, have good cyber hygiene, their cyber security insurance premiums also went down by 20%. Pretty big deal. Now let's talk about communicating risk. Now communication has multiple parts to it. You can communicate risk to your board, your CEO, your CIO, CISOs, and so on. But you also need to be able to communicate to your practitioners. So this is the first step of the process, is getting a really crisp picture of your organization across everything that you have. What's your global risk score? What's the group risk score of your cloud assets? What's your group risk score for your external assets? And so on and so forth. So this is where our unified dashboarding capability comes in. It gives you a crisp understanding of your organization. And we create these dashboards for you. There is a community of dashboards that are available for you so that you can customize as you see fit. Second, Sumit talked about detection. We've got so good at detection, the vulnerabilities get detected every 4 hours. So that is no longer a problem for Qualys customers. Communicating is still a problem, right? And when you communicate, you cannot just communicate through emails or spreadsheets or whatnot. You need to be very precise in terms of who needs to do what. So this is where our integration with ITSM solutions like ServiceNow come in. We not only create the tickets for you, they also automatically get assigned to the right teams. And once they fix the vulnerabilities, they also get remediated and closed out in ServiceNow. So you can communicate the risk not only to your C-level teams, but also your practitioners. And then finally, we also provide a state of the union for your subscription. What is your current cyber risk posture? Where is the highest risk within your organization? What should you really focus on? Which also provides clear recommendations in reducing risk within your organization. Very crisp. And if you're interested in this report, talk to one of our solution architects in the Q&A bar. They'll help you get a state of the union for your subscription. Now before that, this is a case study that came out, and probably the most nearest and dearest to my heart. Banco implemented the entire Qualys solution stack, from VMDR to ServiceNow to patch management. And this is probably the epitome of the message Sumedh was talking about earlier, being able to measure, communicate, and eliminate risk in the organization. They moved to a risk-based approach for vulnerability management, reduced 70% real risk within days in their organization. More importantly, they had to use fewer resources to get more done. Almost 75% fewer resources. And the resources didn't get eliminated. They were repurposed for higher value activities to reduce risk within the organization. So Raphael is going to come on stage later on, and he's going to talk about his case study. And the last part I want to talk about is eliminating risk. So this is where we natively integrate, and Sumedh talked about, everyone joked about, hey, why are you guys doing patch management? And this is something Sumedh saw about 4 or 5 years ago. So we natively integrated our patch management solution with our vulnerability management solution. And when we started off with Windows, but we have expanded that now to Linux operating systems, Mac operating systems, third-party applications. And it's probably the most comprehensive patch management solution that is out there. Even organizations that have SCCM in their organization still continue to use Qualys patch management to fix the things that SCCM cannot eliminate. So we are able to eliminate all the risk across all devices. Now, we are also focused on reducing the friction in patch management, especially those findings that are high risk but low operational impact. What I mean by that is vulnerabilities, for example, in your client-side applications, your browsers, right? So even if you patch them, there is no low operational impact. So this is where we introduced automation to eliminate those kind of risks within the organization. And we do that because these are the kind of vulnerabilities that are actually exploited by ransomwares. If you look at how ransomware exploits happen, typically get a innocuous looking link, you click on it, they exploit a vulnerability in the browser, and the system gets compromised. So we focus on automating things that we can quickly eliminate. We also focus on eliminating attack pathways for an attacker to get in. And this is where MITRE attack framework has done a phenomenal job. It gives out a clear picture how an attacker could go from initial access to data exfiltration. So we have been able to map all these findings across the Qualys platform, vulnerabilities, misconfigurations, EDR, to find out which attack paths an attacker could use to break into your organization, and then select them and eliminate that entire attack pathway from your organization. And then finally, we've also furthered our integration with ServiceNow to make sure that the patches are deployed as soon as the approvals are in. So there is one way to do patch management where you can just click and deploy the patches and eliminate those findings. But there are larger enterprises who have a change approval workflow. They cannot just deploy patches by clicking on a button, right? So this is where we integrate with our ITSM tools like ServiceNow and Jira, where you can create a change request, get the right approvals, and then schedule it. Once it is scheduled, it automatically gets deployed and eliminates the risk. This leads to the third desired outcome. So I cannot name the customer here, but they had 70% vulnerability debt due to third-party applications. I talked about SCCM. Many organizations have SCCM in their organization, so they do a decent job with Windows operating system, but when it comes to third-party applications, not so much. So they had a lot of vulnerability debt. With Qualys, the integrated Qualys platform, they were able to deploy 3 million patches in 6 months. SCCM took about 2 years to just deploy 1 million patches. What that meant was they were able to focus on reducing almost 94% of their vulnerabilities and focus on higher value activities within their organization. Pretty interesting case study. Now, because we do this, there is no other solution that does what Qualys does. From an accurate asset management solution to a risk-based vulnerability management solution to a risk-based remediation solution. And this is why we are consistently ranked as the #1 vulnerability management product in the industry. GigaOM came out with a report earlier this year. They didn't just say we are the leaders. They said these guys are the outperformers. There was no one else in the category. We were the only one. There was one big red dot for Qualys VMDR. Super proud of it. IDC came out with a report earlier this week, and VMDR was one of the leaders in the space as well. So I talked a lot. So I'm going to invite Kevin O'Keefe, one of our best solution architects, on the stage to do a demo about the product, and then I'll come back. So Kevin, come on stage. Let's switch to a demo.
Thank you, Mehul. So you've just seen from Mehul how to use the True Risk Enterprise as a presentation. But how do we actually do it in real life? So I'm actually going to give you a demo. This is a recorded demo. Unfortunately, they didn't allow me to do it live. But this is a recorded demo of a live platform. So what you're about to see, you can do in your platform as well. So let's start with measure. And step 0 of measure is identifying your assets. The Qualys True Risk platform has multiple ways to identify multiple different types of assets, whether it's a container sensor, whether it's a cloud agent. There's multiple ways. But I'm going to look into the external attack surface, because that's the one that's resonating quite well with our customers. You can configure it by just putting your domain and your organization, and just from that information, we're then going to be able to spider out, using the information that we have, using the sources we have, to not only identify your data, but also subsidiaries, acquisitions, and you can see some of the Qualys' acquisitions over the last few years appearing on the domain list here. Once I've identified my assets, how do I measure the risk? So looking at the inventory, I'm going to find one of my external assets that hasn't already been scanned. And I'm going to enable it and activate it to find risks on that asset. So here's my external assets. I'm going to pick my demo asset there, and in less than 5 clicks, I'm going to make it from an unmanaged asset, where I don't have information on the risks, to a managed asset, where I've got full visibility of that asset. Once I've identified that, I can then make a widget to identify exactly my external assets, measure it over time, and then be able to go back and look at all my external assets and then compare them. You can see here I've got some low-risk assets, and I can quickly identify my high-risk asset here. But why is this asset high risk? It's got a business criticality score of 5, so this is coming from the asset tags, or this is coming from your CMDB. It's externally exposed, because we found this with our external attack surface management tool. And then it's got 30 critical and high vulnerabilities. All of this is being taken into account to give this score a 1,000 out of 1,000 score. But we don't just take vulnerabilities into account. As you'll see here, just below the algorithm for true risk, we've got end of support. We've got unauthorized software, because it's not just necessarily vulnerabilities that you need to go out and remediate. It's also things like misconfigurations. It's end-of-life software, unauthorized software. Once we've identified and measured all our risk, how do we communicate? It's very important that we give the right people the right data at the right time. So here is an executive metrics dashboard that I created earlier. It gives me an overall view of my entire environment. I can see my true risks for my global environment, and then what makes up for that environment. I've broken it down based on different regions, so I can then start to compare the different regions. And hey, look at that. Amir's best. No surprises there, I guess. But this is what's good. You can start to gamify vulnerability management or risk management as well. So it's not just that ball, security are telling me I need to go and remediate. Start the competition between Amir, North America, and APAC. I'm breaking it down further based on the different regions, and then I can quickly see that actually Taiwan, Korea, and India have quite a high true risk score. So I better tell my senior management about this. So this is where we go in, and we can create our report schedules. So directly from the platform, I'm going to schedule a report, and I'm going to tell Sumedh, hey, by the way, you've got some high risks in Taiwan. Maybe we need to have a look at that. And then Sumedh hopefully now has an email in his inbox for that. Shailesh talked about our true risk report. I'm not going to go over it too much, but this gives you the ability to give you high-level detail that you can present to your board, to your senior management, from the data already in your platform. Now, being able to just talk about vulnerabilities in the dashboard, sorry, one water quickly. Being able to just talk about vulnerabilities from your dashboards, from your reports, is not necessarily enough. Technical teams want to see the data in their environment on the platforms that they use. So this is a great example where we can use ServiceNow integrations to create tickets directly from them, from the vulnerabilities we find in the ServiceNow platform. In this case, we're going to be creating vulnerabilities based on database teams, and then sending them and assigning them to those database teams. So now the database team can see in their own ServiceNow environment their vulnerabilities. But measuring measuring and then communicating isn't enough. My boss always tells me, don't just come to me with problems, come to me with solutions. And that's where the Qualys True Risk Platform really shines, because we can eliminate those vulnerabilities as well. There are multiple ways to do it, so I'm going to go through a few different ways here. We can prioritize based on the Qualys criticality score. So my cloud agents, in this case, I'm going to choose all my critical vulnerabilities, prioritize it. I can choose to prioritize all of my vulnerabilities and patch them, or just go after my worst ones. And you've just seen here, I'm going to go after my worst vulnerability, and you're going to see how quickly it is to just create a patch job to go after them. But I've changed my mind. I don't want to just go after my worst vulnerability in my environment. I want to go after all of my vulnerabilities that are associated with ransomware. So I could just type in here, anything with a Qualys detection score and associated with ransomware, go and find those vulnerabilities, go and map the patches associated with them, and then remediate them. Go through the motions to get the patch job created, and then within minutes, you've created a job that's going to go out and eliminate that risk across your environment, whether it's one asset or 1 million assets. Like I said, there's multiple ways to do this. There's multiple ways to prioritize. So another way to do this based on our MITRE ATT&CK matrix. So we measure and we map all of the different MITRE ATT&CK tactics and techniques across our environment, or across our detection logics, and then you can then visually see it in a simple diagram like this. We can see for these 26 assets, these are the different MITRE ATT&CK tactics that are affected by them. And I'm going to prioritize lateral movement. Click down on lateral movement. It's going to break it down to the 6 techniques that make up this tactic. And then I want to go after the exploitation of remote services. There are 10 vulnerabilities there. Go in, and I can quickly, again, select those 10 vulnerabilities and create a job based on them. Now, we're not going to go through the entire process of creating a patch job, but you've seen how easy it is just to go from a MITRE ATT&CK detection to a job that will go out and eliminate all of those vulnerabilities. Now, finally, we talked about being able to see the vulnerabilities in ServiceNow so that those teams can see it in their platform. How do we now eliminate the vulnerabilities, again, from the ServiceNow platform rather than having to go into the Qualys platform? We can create detection rules. This is going to create jobs based on particular patches you want to deploy on particular assets. This is then going to create a change request. From those change requests, they will just go through the usual change approval process. So going through, request approval. Hopefully none of you are about to do what I'm doing, which is just overriding and approving all request approvals. And then once that's done, the platform will automatically go in and then create a patch job. And we'll see that patch job be created via the APIs, and we can then track the progress over the next few hours as that patch gets deployed on those agents. Once that's complete, you can then go back into the change request, close that, and say successfully implemented. So hopefully you've seen a few different ways to how we can use our platform to not just measure, not just to communicate, but also eliminate those vulnerabilities at scale, at speed, to de-risk your business. And with that, I'd like to call Mehul back on stage to go through the rest of the presentation.
That's an awesome demo. Thank you. Now, we're not done yet. There's more to managing risk than what we do. One of the biggest frontiers in managing risk is the cloud aspect of it. And cloud requires a different approach. It requires a different licensing mechanism. It requires a different way to scan your assets. There are multiple ways to scan your cloud assets. These assets are ephemeral in nature, so the traditional approaches of vulnerability management may not always work. So I would encourage you to join Parag's session later today, where he talks about total cloud. We have completely reimagined cloud security with total cloud. We talk about the new capabilities that we have added in Total Cloud, the new licensing mechanisms we have added to support cloud security. So make sure you join that session. Active Directory is another major topic in managing risk. We are seeing increasing attacks on Active Directory infrastructure to gain unauthorized access. We have a dedicated session around our Active Directory session tomorrow from Lavish. So make sure you join Lavish's session to understand how Qualys is helping secure your Active Directory infrastructure. And last but not the least, recently we announced our first-party risk management solution. I mean, what we have seen is organizations have got really good at managing vulnerabilities in commercial off-the-shelf systems. But what about open source vulnerabilities? What about applications that you've built in-house, your custom applications, your homegrown applications? This is where this is going to be a game changer for you to understand the risk of your supply chain, understand the risk of your first-party applications. Iran is going to talk about it later today, so make sure you join that session as well. And now I want to bring on one of the best case studies, at least in my career here at Qualys. I mean, there are case studies and there are case studies from a product manager's point of view. What Banco has been able to do, they were an early adopter of VMDR, patch management, and our ServiceNow integration. What they have been able to do in terms of measuring risk, communicating risk, and eliminating risk is mind-blowing. And it's one of my favorite case studies of the year, so I'm going to invite Raphael to talk about how they implemented risk-based vulnerability management with the Qualys platform to come on board and share his story. So Raphael, please come on stage. Thank you.
Hello, guys. How are you doing today? So I'm Brazilian. I'm not a soccer player, so today it's my first time doing this with this huge, a lot of people. So as Sumedh said, English is not my first language, so forgive him for something. Okay, so about Banco. It was founded on 1969 for a Brazilian celebrity called Silvio Santos. I don't know if you guys know. He's famous in Brazil, so. It's headquartered in São Paulo, Brazil. We have about 3,000 employees, and the company is national, so the scope's not for you guys, sorry. So. About me, I'm a cyber risk leader at Banco, but for me, I was thinking about being a security guard in a Samsung store, because, do you know that? No? Because maybe I can be a guardian of the galaxy. So I have 10 years experience in cybersecurity, acting like with penetration testing, vulnerability management, and risk management. And I have an MBA in a university, a Brazilian university called FIAP. It makes sense, it's in Portuguese, so no problem. Our problem was we have like 80,000 vulnerabilities, most of them with SLA expired. So we have like a manual process to correct the vulnerabilities. We have like lack of the team with expertise to remediate our vulnerabilities. We have bad numbers on executive reports, so it's bad for our CISO, it's bad for our directors. And the previous two did not support Linux. So that was our problem. The solution for us was transitioned to a risk-based approach to to a vulnerability-based approach, sorry, for a true risk-based approach. So for us, we are like with 80,000 vulnerabilities to correct. It's a lot of vulnerabilities, so for us, it's difficult to define what to prioritize. So for us, true risk came like as a game changer, so it's so good for us. And we also integrated VMDR with our ServiceNow solution. So for us, it's a good thing because now we can choose what to prioritize using true risk of Qualys. And we also have patch management right now, so it's possible for us to remediate vulnerabilities in less time. So about our results right now. So we have a 70% drop in our critical and high vulnerabilities. We have like 75% drop in number of analysts required to remediate these vulnerabilities. 95% decrease in the number of workstation-related vulnerabilities, and 51% decrease in on-premises servers at Banco. We also have like a more accurate CMDB because now with the integration of Qualys and ServiceNow, the configuration items is showing in our ServiceNow. And before that, it's based on spreadsheets, like Samad says. So we have like a lot of spreadsheets, and these spreadsheets populated our ServiceNow before the integration. For proof of concept, we have like almost 23,000 tickets open right now for our IT teams to remediate the vulnerabilities. We are using True Risk to populate vulnerabilities, to import vulnerabilities to ServiceNow, just the vulnerabilities that are greater than 80 on KDS score. We identified multiple assets that were not updated in ServiceNow. So as I said, before, it's based on spreadsheets. So for our imported assets, also imported vulnerability information. So we have like all the information of the assets, the owners, the teams responsible to correct the vulnerabilities, and the information about our vulnerabilities of all of the assets now within ServiceNow. We automatically deployed patches using patch management, so it helped us a lot. So it's a real game changer for us. So about our key outcome right now. We have a vulnerability reduction, as I said, about 70% reduction considering just critical and high vulnerabilities. We have an MTTR reduction for 54% for servers and 68% less time to remediate vulnerabilities in workstations. Sorry. Time saving, I already said that, so time saving of employee hours. We have one more accurate CMDB right now. We have fast track because right now we are prioritizing vulnerabilities of greater than 80 on KDS, using KDS of True Risk. And all of that increased our cyber maturity because right now we are more capable to use our internal resources at Banco in a smarter way. So that's it. Thank you, guys.